Have you heard the latest news that just happened about Don Lemon? Yeah, remember Don Lemon? He used to work for the CNN. Listen up.
News for you. Former CNN anchor Don Lemon was arrested late last night on federal charges tied to a protest earlier this month at a church in St. Paul, Minnesota. Lemon says he was reporting as a journalist when demonstrators interrupted a service to protest immigration enforcement. A magistrate judge previously rejected the case against him, but prosecutors later sought and obtained his arrest. Lemon was taken into custody in Los Angeles and is scheduled to appear in federal court this morning. His lawyer, Abbe Lowell, calls the prosecution an unprecedented attack on the First Amendment. We have Lisa Rubin here, Molly John Fax joining us. But Jonathan Lemire, can we go through a little more what happened in St. Paul in the church, so then Lisa can break down these charges and how it all matches up?
Yeah, we'll lean on her legal expertise in just a moment. But Don Lemon is now an independent journalist, no longer at CNN. He was in Minnesota covering the protests following the two shooting deaths there of Renee Good and then Alex Pretty. This one on January 18th in St. Paul, so just over the river from Minneapolis, protesters went inside a church. They were disruptive to this service. We'll get to Lisa in a moment as to why that would be a charge here. But and Don Lemon, to remind viewers, is, someone who Donald Trump has criticized repeatedly in the past. Lemon has been pretty tough on Trump. He has called him names. He frequently calls him a liar. Lemon is someone that Trump has gone after on Truth Social and the like for many years. He's always been an object of some ridicule in the MAGA movement. But what is so important here is this is what matters, is that Lemon says, and we will see if it is the truth, but Lemon says he was acting as a journalist. He was not participating in the protest. He was covering the protest.
That was my question.
And if that is the case, if that's the case, that is indeed a chilling moment here for a journalist in the United States of America doing his job as a journalist and being charged for it. That is not. Did
he conduct interviews inside the? I mean, I know the protest was happening, and so he followed the protest in to cover the story. At any point, did he take part in?
Yeah, we'll see if we have footage here, but he did. He interviewed some of the protesters. He interviewed some of the parishioners. He interviewed, I think he tried to talk to the minister at one point,
right.
Which was perhaps disruptive in that moment. But again, he's acting as a journalist. And Lisa, let's talk about what charge is being levied here and your opinion as to why this is so important.
Let's talk about what we don't know. We know that Don Lemon is still in federal custody right now as we speak. But my understanding is no charges have been filed and unsealed. Don Lemon and his legal team don't even know when he'll make his initial appearance at a Los Angeles federal court this morning. That having been said, Jonathan, based on the criminal complaint and affidavit that were filed when authorities tried to get initial charges against Don Lemon to stick, I can tell you that it appears that the federal government is pursuing charges under what's called the FACE Act. And the FACE Act is something that folks who follow the reproductive justice movement are very familiar with because it most commonly has been used to prosecute people who block access to reproductive health clinics, who sit there and physically block it. But the FACE Act also prohibits interfering by force with the right to religious worship. And this is an administration who has said they won't use the FACE Act to prosecute crimes of the first type, and they are going to start to use the FACE Act to prosecute crimes of the second. When you look at the affidavit that was filed in that criminal complaint, originally against 8 people, only 3 of them were eventually charged, there is lots of recitation about what Don Lemon allegedly did during that church protests, talking about him both interviewing people outside and sort of talking with the organizers of that protest, sort of embedding with them as they prepared to go in, and then live streaming the protest. And as you noted, even the affidavit quotes him as saying, "I'm just here to chronicle and report on what's happening." He also underscores at one point, I'm going to read to you from the complaint, "I'm looking at a young man who's in the corner. He's frightened. He's scared. He's crying. People are leaving church. An unknown male parishioner was observed yelling to the agitators, telling them to get out." And then he says, "I don't think they know what to do. I'm sure they probably called the local authorities right now." if I'm guessing the authorities, the federal authorities, are relying on some of Don Lemon's own language to suggest that the protesters themselves were putting the people in the church in fear of their safety, which is how they are criminalizing this protest. But how that means Don Lemon himself is criminally liable is something that I think you, and others are going to be struggling to understand in the coming days. Again, we have not seen the federal charges. They have not been unsealed in Minnesota, nor has any indication of his arrest been unsealed in Los Angeles. We await those right now, along with his legal team, Abbe Lowell, of course, saying this is a violent infringement of Don Lemon's First Amendment rights.
And I think I remember watching some of the coverage of Don Lemon covering what was happening inside the church. And I think that he was talking about the children who were crying in the church, that there was a lot going on at the same time, and said, that's what happens in a protest or something.
He said, I'm going to read from that, Mika, you're right.
Get me to that?
Yes. This is the beginning of what's going to happen here. Again, this is from Don Lemon's live stream the day of the protest inside the church. When you violate people's due process, when you pull people off the street and start dragging them and hurting them and not abiding by the Constitution, when you start doing all of that, people get upset and angry. And then the affidavit continues, name redacted, which people understand to be Don Lemon, goes on to suggest that according to the Constitution, again, this is the Department of Justice's words, there are no limitations to protesters on where and when they can exercise their constitutional rights. That's the whole point of it, is to disrupt, and that's what they're doing, and that's what I believe.
So Don Lemon now being held, though, and they have no official charges at this point.
No, and let's remember, this also comes just a few weeks after the FBI searched a Washington Post reporter's home.
Yes.
On a national security matter.
Took computers.
Took devices, took computers. And the Post was assured that the reporter herself was not a target of the investigation. It was one of her sources. But that was seen as a real crackdown on the freedom of the press.
That's the latest thing that just happened. Don Lemon. We all know Don Lemon from CNN. Now that he is an independent journalist, he was doing his job, covering the protest that is going on. And I think that protest that he covered, been doing his job as a journalist, got this arrest to happen. That's what everybody is saying, but they are just still waiting for what he is going to be charged with. Until then, drop your comment. What do y'all think? Are you surprised that this is happening to a journalist?